When we left off, we were going to talk about the importance of locking cells when using a vlookup and using other formulas. Right now we're going to use the vlookup to demonstrate how to lock cells and why we do it. So let's say, for example, we wanted our minute totals in this range in column B. And we have our data in cells C2 to C6, and we're just going to try to replicate that data in cells B10 to B13. So let's do our vlookup formula, and we're going to not lock our array in the vlookup. So equals vlookup using values starting in cell A10 as reference points, and then starting our array in cell A2, going over to column C and going down to C6. So our array is A2 to C6 to start with, and we want to return data in the third column of our range, so comma 3, comma false for exact match. And we have James Harden at, as you can see, 2,777 minutes for the season. We're then going to drop our formula down, and you can see that the formula works for Carmelo Anthony and Stephen Curry, but not so for LeBron James. So let's examine our formula by hitting the F2 button. And when we hit F2, the Excel will highlight the data we've selected in the formula. So we have our reference point as A10, looking at first at cells A2 to C6, and so we have James Harden in the third column of the range next to James Harden, 2,777 minutes, which is what value we have returned in cell B10. Moving down, hitting the F2 button, you can see that our range, because we haven't locked it and we've moved our formula down one cell, the range is now pointing at cells one cell grade below where we had started our formula, starting in row 3 and going to row 7 rather than row 2 to row 6, because we have not locked our formula. But Carmelo Anthony's name is still in that range, so we return his minute total in the formula that we put in cell B11. However, when we go to LeBron James's name, let's look at our array there. Our array is from A5 to C9. And LeBron James's name, although it's a reference point in cell A13, it is not in the range of data that we've selected between cells A5 and C9. Therefore, Excel doesn't recognize LeBron James's name as being able to return a value, so Excel gives us back an NA error. So let's lock our formula and see what happens instead. Writing in the same formula, we're only going to change one thing, so equals vlookup. And we are going to lock our formula by hitting the F4 key, comma 3, comma false, enter. And you can see, because we've locked our range, our array stays constant even though our formula is moving among cells. And to prove it, in cell B10 our formula looks between A2 and C6, as well as in B13 the formula also, because our formula is locked, looks at A2 to C6. You know your formula is locked when there are dollar signs around the letters, or around the cell numbers. But moving on, we want to get to our points per minute totals. So how are we going to do that? We're going to need to bring in our season point totals, and we're going to do that again by using a vlookup. So equals vlookup, using names as a reference point, going into the point totals tab, starting with Kevin Durant and going to season point totals, Once again, locking our range. And we are looking at the 6th column in our range, so comma 6, comma false, and we have point totals. Now there's one more column that we need in order to calculate our points per 24, 36, and 48 minutes, and that is points per 1 minute, so points per minute. And what we're going to do here is just some simple arithmetic. We're going to take point totals. Division sign is a slash, so equals D2 divided by minutes. Now we have points per minute for LeBron James for the season. We're going to multiply that by 24 because we want to get the 24-minute point totals. Going to multiply points per minute by 36 using the star key equals E2 by 36, dropping that down using Control D, and points per 48 minutes equals E2 times 48. Now, I don't want to use all these decimal places, so I'm going to select our range and click the decimal key, the decrease decimal key, and I want to go to 2 decimal places out to the hundredths place. There we go. Now we have some more manageable looking numbers. So I also want to know, and I'm going to introduce another formula here, I want to rank these players, and I want to see who's the top player per 24, 36, and 48 minutes. So I'm going to insert some columns. Minute rank, rank, and rank per 48 minutes. The rank formula is fairly simple. You just enter equals rank, and you're ranking one number against a range, so comma, and then we're going to look at the values in cells F2 to F6, and we want to look at the same range for every rank, so for every number, so we're going to lock our range, and then close our parentheses. Going to only use 1 decimal point, drop our formula down, and actually in this case let's do that formula again. We only want to lock our rows because we're going to use this formula in columns I and columns K. So equals rank, still ranking the same number, but we're only going to lock the rows, and you'll see why in a second. And to lock rows only, we hit F4 twice, and you can see the dollar signs are only next to the row numbers. The column numbers are free. Let's hit enter. Now we're going to copy this formula by hitting Control C, clicking in column I and column K, and hitting Control V. Going to drop this formula down in column I, and again in column K. Now everything was formatted nicely. And you can see ranks are pretty similar, but let's look at what's inside of our formulas here. So we'll hit F2. That formula, because we locked the column, is looking at the cells in column F. Our formula in column I is looking at cells in column H. And our formula in column K is looking at cells in column J. So locking the rows only told our formula look in rows 2 to 6, but allow the formula to look one row to the left. Do not lock one column to the left. Do not lock the column for this formula. Let's make our table look a little prettier than it does now. We'll just go over some formatting at this point. So I don't like all these grid lines in our table, so I'm going to hit Alt WVG. Now we don't have those grid lines anymore. I'm going to put some borders around our table. So I'm going to hit Alt HBS for an outside border. And you can follow the shortcut letters on Excel, and you'll get the hang of them once you do them a few times. Alt HB is generally the border shortcuts. Now I want a double border below this first line, so double bottom border is Alt HBB. And I want to put a thick border around our player names, Alt HBT. And let's put our top categories in bold by hitting Control B. And now we have our totals, our minute totals, our point totals, our points per minute, points per 24, ranks 36, minute totals, ranks 48 minute average, and ranks.